When it comes to doing a competitive market analysis for a home, about 70% of the time you're going to find yourself pricing a house that falls into what we call a standard neighborhood. Now, a standard neighborhood is one that's clearly identifiable on a map, is clearly labeled and clearly platted, and usually sometimes has an HOA. So in this case, we're going to price a standard home in a well-defined subdivision using the Focus First software. Now, we're not going to actually use the software in this video. We're just going to use the graphs that are created by the software. But basically, all you have to understand is that the graphs that we're going to show you that make this really understandable were created using the Focus First process and using the Focus First software. Now, the whole point of saying that it's not just the software but also the process is because the process that Focus First is built on is a little different than the standard pricing process. Our process adds 2 extra steps that usually get skipped. So the first step is understanding the subject property, which we all understand that one, understanding the details of the house. Now then we look at the area patterns, basically what's been going on a wide scale or on a local scale in that area. Then we look at a scattergram to really kind of evaluate and compare when it comes to looking at how homes have been selling and what value they've sold for. And then to do the competitive aspect, we take the next step further. We then look at the market momentum, the competition on the market, and what's coming in order to position ourselves correctly for the right advantage that buyers want to buy our house. And then we move to a bridge where more buyers will see it. So let's walk through this whole process, steps 1 through 5, with our example property here in the standard neighborhood. So step 1 is understanding that subject property. So our property is at 1234 Address Street in Fort Collins, Colorado. It's 4,000 total square feet, 3,500 finished. It's a 2-story, 5-bed, 3-bath on 0.2 acres, built in 1995 in the subdivision of English Ranch. Now the key feature here that we also want to look at was that it's been well maintained, the landscaping's good, and it's been well taken care of, but it's not fully modernized. As you can imagine, 30-year-old home, some areas in that neighborhood or some houses in that neighborhood have been updated and fully modernized. In this case, this house has not been, but it's still in really good shape. Then we're going to look at a map here just to show you basically what we're looking at. You can see that this little dot that the arrow is pointing to is the assigned house, if you will, for our fake house. It's in the neighborhood, which is the candy-caned little striped area here of English Ranch. And it's right on one of these main roads. Now the key thing here is it's not in a cul-de-sac. It's not backing to one of the busier roads on the outside. It's kind of right smack in the middle, and basically our standard looking lot layout. So using that now, let's jump to step 2, understand the area patterns. Now, there's 2 area patterns we like to look at. One is the wide area, or basically city-wide area, to really give us a good idea of what appreciation has been doing. And then the other are more localized market factors that help us really understand positioning and get the right answers to key customer experience questions like how long should it take my house to sell, or is my area under a kind of hot desired zone, or is it kind of cold off? So first, let's look at the wide area patterns. So you can see here that we look at the appreciation for Fort Collins Loveland, which is the metropolitan statistical area that the government tracks from the Federal Housing and Finance Administration, which is where this data and graph comes from. But seeing that we average about 5.6%, we should see some growth based on the sellers, however long they've held this house. Now we're going to look at the real data. So to view this data, we're going to search the MLS. We put this in our software, which visualizes it and creates the graphs for us. Then we use those graphs to understand the patterns and then logically position ourselves for sale. So everything from this point forward is using real data that I loaded into the software to create the graphs that you're going to see. So the first graph we're going to take a look at is what we call the odds of selling. And the odds of selling basically puts on a bar chart the properties that have closed, those that are under contract, those are for sale, and those that went on the market and expired or withdrew and did not sell. Using that, we can see that in the last 12 months, we have about 71% odds of selling. Now, anything in the 70% means it's really desirable area. Most houses in most areas, just to say, have a good odds of selling if they're priced correctly, but some areas are better than others. Some areas can be as low as 30, some areas can be as high as 89 or 90, but 70% means that the odds are in your favor. So that tells us that this neighborhood is desired in Fort Collins. Now, the next graph we look at is the average time to close, which really gives us a couple good key answers. The first answer we can look at is the average days before closed. In this neighborhood is 50 days. Now, assuming a contract length of about 45 days, that means offers are coming in pretty quick if you're priced correctly. Now, outside of that, we can also see that there's not a correlation between them being priced higher and taking longer to sell. Actually, you can see the ones that went a little bit longer to sell were down that 600 range, 650-ish, while the ones up in 900 were selling just as fast as the ones in the 700s or 800s. So there's not a difference here where some people think higher price takes longer, lower price goes faster, but in this neighborhood, that's not true. We can also see here that based on when I did this search, which I collected this in July, we have missed our buying window, which is the most active time for buyers to be looking in this neighborhood to purchase homes. This one actually falls in February to May, which is a little bit strange for some people, but it's just the way that this neighborhood works out, which is why it's always good to look at the data real time, localized. So we have good odds of selling, we're selling fast, but we're not necessarily in our prime buying window, so we'll keep that in mind when we get to positioning later on. Now you can say, well, what about the year prior? Well, looking at the year prior, just in case you kind of doubted the software, you can see that it still is really that February to May has the majority of it, maybe a little bit in the fall, the prior year, but again, the summertime is not the time this neighborhood sells. So our key point summary here was we're not in our first window, but there is a second window we might be approaching. But at the same time, we just kind of have to know that we're not in the buying pattern window. However, we are selling very fast and we have high odds of selling. So now let's look at the process that most of you are comfortable with, the establishing value based on cells. So we look at the main pricing factors on a scattergram. That's location, which we've done by our search by just looking at the neighborhood, size, conditions, special features, and amenities. So this graph here shows the homes that have sold in the neighborhood as blue dots, and the trend line here in the red is basically the associated value based on size. Now, this is not technically a price per square foot because it does vary pretty drastically from the lower houses to the higher houses, but this is a real good trend line we can look at. So one thing we want to look at first is the outliers before we even start looking to use this graph. And the reason why we do that is sometimes you can have an outlier that might not be relevant to your data you want to look at or your house. It might be kind of a misnomer in the search. So in this case, we can see that there's one way above and one way below that both have text boxes added to them. The one way above was built in 1994. Does seem like it fits our neighborhood and fits our data, but it's clearly an updated finishes with a finished basement, which is causing it to jump that high above the line. Again, like I said earlier, some houses here are probably getting fixed up. Some, maybe like ours, are in good shape and need kind of some updating, but are not necessarily in like bad condition. Now, this one that's way down below is actually a patio home and it's pretty cluttered. So it has two negatives that kind of drag it down below that. As you know, most people would probably assume, patio homes tend to sell for a lower price than the standard home on a bigger lot. So knowing that now, we can see, okay, what moved it above the line, what moved it down, and now we're going to look at the ones that are similar in size to us that are near that trend line. So we're out here at 4,000 total square feet. So we're going to look at the three closest dots to us and say, which of these dots do we most match? Well, this top dot that's above the line, top text box here, has a finished basement, modern updated kitchen, and extra exclusions. Again, updates took it above the line. The second one here, the middle one, is finished basement, well-maintained, but older finishes. Okay, now that's a 5-bed 4-bath. We were a 5-bed 3-bath, but that's still pretty close to ours. And the bottom one here has finished basement, updated kitchen, older finishes elsewhere, but less inclusions overall. You can see that it is a 5-bed 4-bath as well, but it's got a little bit smaller acreage, and if we looked at that, it's also on a cul-de-sac technically, but it's actually a cul-de-sac back into a major road, which is what's dragging it down a little bit more. So knowing that though, we're saying which of these dots do we both match up close with, which in this case is the one that's right in the line. So we can kind of assume that our 4,000 square foot house is going to be pretty close to this line when we go to price it. And this is what we call base value. This base value is the idea that this is what the sold properties are telling us that this house is worth, but we also do know that the market's moving. It could be going up, it could be going down a little bit, and because of that, we know this is the price we're going to start at, but we might want to adjust this up or down, and that's what we call a pricing range. So a pricing range for us is probably going to range somewhere around this level, right? It could be 830, it could be all the way down to 800, or it could be up some, maybe up to even like 870 where this other one sold at as well. So we know that we could sell and probably price the house somewhere in that range and still get offers and attention. Now the question we have to ask ourselves is, where in that range do we end up pricing it, where buyers will see it and want to buy it? And that's where we get to the concept of positioning. But before we jump into the actual positioning aspect, we have to know what our competition is. And all we have to do is take this range and then expand it a little bit. So these orange ones here are what we call the competitive range. So basically, where in the market will buyers have an overlap searching for data or searching for houses that the low end of some buyers and the high end of other buyers will both find us. This kind of idea of searching a little bit wider allows us to find competition that if a buyer was looking at our house and another house, they would then compare ours versus theirs. So we're not missing out on knowing we can beat the houses on a perceived value standpoint that we are competing for the same buyer with. So knowing that, we're going to competitively position the home using data from an idea of what buyers are looking for. So how buyers are searching is we're going to use that price range, and this is an image of our guide essentially that we have for searching for right data. But we're going to say, how does a buyer search? They search in a price range that they can afford, they search in an area that they want to live in, and they search based on features of home and value, and then compare their options and say, we like this one the best, let's put the offer in there. And it's pretty standard. If you've worked with buyers before, you kind of know that that's how it goes. I mean, if you bought a house yourself before, that's how it goes. So knowing that, what we're going to do is do a new search, getting the data that really shows us all the information that they're going to see so we can position ourselves correctly. So we're going to look at something that we call the buyer zone first. And this is a wider area where a buyer will be searching. In this case, all of basically Southeast Fort Collins, which has the same school district, has the same proximity to amenities, and is about the same time-ish when it comes to development. Now you can see our neighborhood is this blue square down here, and then also up this whole red area is our actual buyer zone that we're looking against. Now we're going to do that, but we're going to constrain it by that competitive price range. When we do that, the first graph we look at is called the pond. Now the pond tells us if the momentum is in our favor or if it's in buyer's favor or seller's favor. And that's this dial up here at the top. Now this dial up top, you can see points to buyers, meaning that the market is slowing down. And that tells us, oops, let me get it back 1 second, tells us that we are going to position our house from our base price, which is right in that line, down a little bit to that lower end that we thought we might be going down to. This shows the market is slowing down at the moment. In the next 90 days, that way we can really know where we're going to position against. Now, as you can see, this graph here is created with a couple layers of blue. Now, we call this the real estate pond because it's made to really look like a layer of water. Homes that come on the market from the left side, if they're in the top layer, that means they have the most visibility. They're getting shown, they're getting offers, they're going under contract, and they're flowing right back out, much like the high-level part of a water would in a lake or pond. Now, if they come on the market and they don't get offers right off the bat, and so they're for sale, but they're not necessarily under contract yet, they start to sink down a little bit because they're not moving quite as fast. And so when that happens, they get to the second layer where they're showing, and they're still on the market, there's still competition, but they're not that top one that's flowing out. Now, if a house sinks too low, sits too long, and doesn't take any actions to bring itself back up to that flowing or high visibility spot, it can become stagnant, and those are the ones that probably aren't going to sell. So just like that, we make these little layers on this graph as the under contract, on the market, not under contract, and those that are likely to not sell. Now what we want to do is we want to look at this number first and say there's 10 projected homes that are going to sell in the next 90 days. We know that there's 6 that are currently under contract. We're going to go ahead and assume that those are probably going to go all the way through. And that leaves us with 4 new projected sales. So if there's 4 new projected sales, there's 5 currently showing, and there's 4 new coming in, including ours. We're going to add those together. So the 5 is that showing level. The 4 is the top left number. And then the 1 is ours coming in. We have 10 total that are on the market for sale. What that tells us is when we go to positioning, we need to be in the top 40% of homes both that are on the market now, and as new entrants come in, we need to bring ourselves up if we're sinking below that number. So that seems a little extra mathy, but the main thing we have to know is we need to be in the top 40%. So we need to be the top half, essentially, of the homes that are on the market when we position our price to make sure we have the right value. So we're going to go ahead and skip through this guy that's told this whole thing and look at a scattergram that shows the homes that are for sale in green and those that are under contract in the gold diamond. As you can see here, you got a number of homes that have sold and a number that are for sale. Now, you can kind of see there's a little bit of pattern developing. And so if we look at the pattern first, you can see the houses that are up here versus the houses that are down here. One has a lot of sales and one's only got one sale and the rest are for sale. Now, the difference between these is the newer finishes, either through renovation or rebuild, or the older style finishes or smaller lot are down here. So when we look at positioning, we already know what of these two categories we fit into. So we know we're probably going to be in this older style finishes or smaller lot, which again matches our kind of pricing idea, where we're going to look from base value going down, which you can see here, we're going to probably be in that down lower level because it matches the pattern we fit. Now, some people also will see this and say, okay, if my sellers are not motivated to sell instantly, I can tell them that doing some renovations will bump them up into this area, and that's what people are buying more hotly anyways, so we can kind of take those actions and guide them correctly in the sales process. But assuming we are selling now, we're going to first look at our base value, which was right here at the 830. And any homes that would be in this top left quadrant, where the plus is, are homes we have advantage over. That means that basically what we're saying is they're higher priced for less square footage than ours. So unless something really drastic is different about that, we would have a competitive advantage over them. Now, on the corollary to that is in the bottom right where the negative is, that is a larger house for less price than us, and we have a disadvantage to that. So what this tells us here is, okay, this house down here on the Southfield Court is a larger house for less money and actually has more bedrooms and is newer build than us. So that's a better value for a buyer if they were looking for a house. So that house beats us currently. Remember, we need the top 40%. If we look at the other one down here on Hay Meadow Way, this is a 2-story on a smaller lot, 5-bed, 5-bath, 3-car garage, but built in 2010, so much newer than ours. So really the thing is someone might say, yeah, but I want a bigger lot. Okay, but this is kind of a coin flip. And because we're not in our buying window, we only have one of the advantages in our corner. It's a coin flip that we kind of are scared to take the risk on because all the rest of these houses down there in that bottom left make sense for a buyer. They're smaller and they cost less. So those kind of are neutral as far as the advantage goes. But if they are like this one here that was built in 2010, we're going to be in trouble. But remember, the momentum told us to go from base to the low value. So let's look at the low position here. So from 830, we're going to go down to our low position, which is down all the way down at 780, which would be the potential lowest we would go. And we can see in this case, all of those homes that are for sale are in this top left quadrant now, meaning they're all smaller and higher priced than our house would be. We're beating every single one of them in value. Now, the house that's right now that we were losing to, it's bigger, but it costs more than us. So at that point, we're now tied with that one. So in this case, we are the best value home on the market. Now you might say, okay, great, so just pricing low, of course. But we don't necessarily have to price all the way at the bottom because sometimes we can kind of look at this and say, is there a stronger pricing bridge that brings maybe some of these ties into advantage for us and keeps us still in that realm of possibility? So for example, if we look at the 800 here, I'm just going to leave this other graph on here. If we were to price there, we would be losing now that Southfield Court as far as perceived value goes because they're newer, they're bigger, and they're the same price. Understand. But we didn't have to be number one. We need to be top 40%. So at 800 though, this other house that's listed here at about 790 is smaller size, smaller acreage, and is a little bit newer than us. But at this point, you have to ask yourself is, okay, we have a larger house, larger acreage, and overall, I guess, less bathrooms. But our neighborhood, if I looked at the Hay Meadow Way versus that one, we have a high odds of selling. So that tie becomes much closer. So in this case, we're probably a straight tie. So we're tied second place in that one. Now the rest of these here that are getting lower than that, they're much smaller house than ours for about 10,000 less, or even some of these maybe being 5,000 less. Those kind of move into that advantage position. So we're really making sure we're tied second in this case as far as value goes. Plus that 800,000 has the added bonus of accomplishing our last task, which really means the pricing on a bridge. So the pricing on a bridge concept is really the idea of catching this level where two buyers are searching, where you get the most traction and most eyes on your property. And it's really kind of interesting because if you think about it, it's how all the search values are coded. Whether you put it in your MLS or people are looking on Zillow or Realtor.com, they're usually by these hundreds or 50s in general. So if we go with the 800,000 versus the 780, we are putting ourselves a little bit in a tied second place position, but we're getting a lot more attention, eyes on our home. Now, if we go there, we're not selling very fast, or we're getting a lot of feedback that it is overpriced. We know it's overpriced. We know where we're going to drop down to put ourselves in that value position that's going to make the difference. But in this case, the 800,000 is really defended pretty well because we're in the high odds. We're kind of getting close to some of these other patterns too, and we're in a good spot. Now that being said, it's always the customer's decision. So it's always an idea of give them this presentation, let them decide. If they're really motivated and they want to go faster, we've had people say, can we go like 785? Absolutely we can. Other people want to say, hey, all right, let's go with the 8 and see how it goes. Or they want to kind of wait and see. But we know from the time to sell here being 50 days that in that first week, if we don't have an offer, we know that we're going to be in danger of missing that window. And we know it's overpriced for the value that the market perceives. So it's a pretty fast feedback in this one. So in this case, we're going to probably price here, which fits us right in that pattern and be in a good spot to sell. As I said earlier, all the graphs that you've seen in this pricing example were created using the Focus First software. Now, a lot of you watching this video are already subscribers and already are members of the Focus First family, and we thank you so much for watching this video. Now, if you're not one of them and you're kind of interested in how you can get these graphs yourself, the Focus First software is a powerful tool that comes with more than just the software that you've seen. It comes with the software, comes with classes to master this pricing process, comes with another integrated software that we call the Real Estate Review software that really allows you to use pricing to create conversations that lead to transactions, specifically from your list. And it comes with that FHFA graph that are updated quarterly that you can really keep yourself in flow. Now, if you're a member and if you already are taking advantage of some of these resources, just remember to go to your account area, log in, and find all these and more as we keep adding more value to the subscription. Now, if you're not a member and you've seen this and you're kind of intrigued and want to learn more about it, just know that if you're ready to join your top performing peers that are currently winning more listings and selling homes, all you have to do is subscribe today. We have membership options from $300 a year all the way down to $39 a month. There's totally flexible of no contract, cancel anytime, and really a satisfaction guarantee. And to get access to that, all you have to do is go to focusfirst.com where you can learn more and sign up today. Now, we really at Focus First believe showing is better than telling. So if you want to watch more videos just like this one, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're going to keep releasing more pricing examples of different property types, including but not limited to some of them that are multifamily, some of them that are more rural, and some of them that really don't fit into standard neighborhoods like the one today. Again, most of them will always be in the standard neighborhood, but we want to show you how the pricing process and this software's graphs really work for everything. So check us out at focusfirst.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next video.